Hello and welcome back to another Skyrim guide video. Today we're going to be talking about the warrior build. I am Sam with the Gent Mafia and I'd like to thank you for joining me. So we are going to be talking about warriors, and warriors are something that I would recommend for most people that are just starting off in the Elder Scrolls universe. This is going to be definitely great for getting your feet wet if you want to go ahead and start playing it as a warrior. Now, the races I'm going to be highlighting here don't necessarily have to be the ones that you choose in order to go into a warrior build, although these ones are going to be slightly a cut above the rest of the races. So we're going to start with the Breton here. Now, Bretons are great because they have a resistance to magic. This is very, very helpful early game, just because early game when you're picking up your different kinds of armors, you're not necessarily going to have any enchantments or buffs on them to help you resist magic. Magic is pretty well straight shotting through your armor, so this is going to be great to kind of counteract that early game. You also have buffs to some of your things such as restoration, which is definitely going to be something that you want to potentially look into if you're going to be a warrior. You can also go ahead and use conjuration, use bound weapons. Bretons are great if you want to do a spell sword or if you just want to have a natural resistance to spells anyways. The next one is the Dark Elf. Dark Elves are great because they have resistance to fire, very similar to Bretons, where they have a resistance to a spell type. It's great for that kind of thing. Fire is going to be doing the most damage. They also have natural buffs in the light armor category. Destruction, like I was mentioning, if you want to go ahead and do a spell sword. The next one, and I think one of the better ones, are going to be the Nords. They have a resistance to frost. The reason why that is so important is because frost is going to go ahead, anytime you deal with a frost spell, it's going to drain your stamina. Now, stamina is very, very important if you're a warrior, just because you're going to be using power attacks if you want to really deal some damage, and then if you also have all of your stamina sapped, you're going to be doing less damage. So it is very, very important to kind of go ahead and look at that. You can get potions though, so that way you have resistance to frost, although having it built into your character is not a bad option. The next one I want to go ahead and cover are orcs. Orcs are very, very great if you want to play a very, very aggressive play style. They have the active known as Berserk Rage, which is just going to make them better and stronger. It's arguably the best active in the entire game. Very, very recommended if you're going to go ahead and do that, although a lot of people kind of shy away from the orc because it's not necessarily the most attractive looking race physically. They are very, very powerful. They have buff one-handed, smithing, two-handed, enchanting, and black, which is pretty much the stereotypical kind of thing that you want to look at if you're going to be going into any form of a warrior race. Orcs naturally have a better start in that. The next thing is going to be the Red Guards. Red Guards are very, very good for this as well. They have resistance to poisons. They also have an adrenaline rush, which is very similar to the Orcs' Berserk Rage. They also have buffs in smithing, one-handed, block, destruction, and alteration, which would make them great options, especially if you're looking at a spell sword. Definitely go ahead and look at the Red Guard. So after you go ahead and you select whatever race you are, you're going to go ahead and start looking at how you want to build your character. And the most important thing is how you're going to want to go ahead and do damage. So the main ways that you're going to be looking at doing damage are going to be, do you want to be a two-handed character? Do you want to be a one-handed character? Those are going to be your two main ways. You can also go ahead and use archery, but this is more just kind of being a brawler. Archery is a very, very good second option along with destruction. Spell swords, or if you want to do some sort of archery, you do need something that, because it will help against things such as dragons. Dragons don't always land on the ground. Sometimes they'll float above you, and you need a way to kind of shoot at them, do damage, or even if you want to pepper them a little bit before you go in and start brawling. Those are great secondary options, but the two main ones that we're going to be looking at here are one-handed and two-handed. For this character, I've gone ahead and gone with the one-handed build. Two-handed is great as well. So after you go ahead and you pick that out, the next thing you're going to want to kind of look at is what kind of armor you want to go into. If you're doing a warrior, for the most part you want to stick to the heavy armor skill tree. Although one-handed and archery, this you can kind of get away with light armor. I would not recommend doing a light armor with two-handed. You can certainly do it, although I would not necessarily recommend it. It is a lot better if you go ahead and deal with light armor with the one-handed, because you can do things with daggers and the swords and you want to move around quickly. So for the most part, you're going to want to be looking at heavy armor if you're going to be doing that. I would avoid black. This is going to require you to use shields. You don't necessarily have to use shields, I guess. You can use your weapons to block, but for the most part, you're going to have something in your left hand. You don't necessarily want to be, you know, just rocking with your sword or your battle axe and then have nothing in your left hand. Block, I would not necessarily recommend going into. It will give you some things so you can resist damage, but for the most part, your armor skills are going to go ahead and take care of that for you, especially when you start putting buffs on. Smithing is another thing that's very important. You can craft your own armors if you really want to. Otherwise, this is just going to make it so that way your armors are that much stronger and give you that much more protections, to where smithing is important. And then lastly, there is enchanting, which is going to go ahead and give you buffs. So I'm going to start it off by talking about the one-handed, since that is a tree that I have already invested some time into. So you're going to notice this with most of the trees. There's going to be a basic kind of improvement system at the very beginning. So the very, very base stat, that's going to give you increased damage or increased protections depending on how you are. And then as you move along, it's going to allow you to specialize a little bit more. On the right side, you can go ahead and use dual wielding. So this is going to be very, very good, especially if you're using a character that has daggers. This is going to make it so much better for you. Dual flurry, you're going to be able to attack faster. This is absolutely awesome. I'm definitely going to be going into this perk. If you want to start off dual handing early, you definitely want to pick this up as soon as you possibly can. It also has a low level requirement at 30 for the very first level, and that's 20% faster. There's also a shout that's going to allow you to attack faster as well. And then you also have dual savagery, which is a level 70 perk, so especially after you've got it going a little bit, your dual wielding power attacks will do a bonus 50% damage. There's a awesome power attack. Especially if you're using daggers, you will do a real quick 3 spin, and that generally is going to one-hit most enemies, especially if you have 100 one-handed and you have all of the perks buffed, so that way you're going to be doing your extra damage. So the next thing you're going to want to be looking at here is you have the fighting stance, which is going to make it so that way all of your one-handed power attacks do less stamina. This is something that you're going to want to look at very, very early. This is going to make it so that way you don't run out of stamina and you can do more damage. The next thing you want to really look at after you've kind of gone through this, like I was mentioning, this is a low level requirement. Specializing in whether you want to use, you know, a little hammer, a little axe, or if you want to use a sword. So you have the hack and slash over here for war axes. Right here you have the bone breaker for maces, and then blazeman for swords. I went ahead and I picked up the swords. They're all got 3 levels, so they're going to give you increased buffs to whatever kind of thing you have. Blazeman is crits, maces ignores armor, and the hack and slash causes bleed damage. That is the kind of 3 things that you're going to look at. So go ahead and pick out one of those, and then you can start buffing that. The first level or 2 is really all you need, and then you'll notice how quickly, you know, things are going to increase from there. Next, you're going to kind of go in and look at your next part. The critical charge, very, very nice. This sprinting power attack does a lot of damage. Savage strike, very, very great as well. And then lastly, you have the level 100, the backslash, chance to paralyze your target. Although if you have all these other perks where you're just completely essentially one-hitting things, this isn't necessarily going to be the most important thing, but eventually down the road this could become important to you. Next, I'm going to talk about two-handed. Two-handed is fairly similar to the one-handed. You have your basic attack buffs, reduced stamina cost, and then you also have the different things depending on if you want to go Warhammer, War Axe, or if you want to use great swords. It all kind of depends on there, and then they also have buffs to the different kinds of damage attacks and positional attacks that you want to do. Overall, it's going to be fairly similar. You're going to start off and go ahead, do your buffs to your damage. Then you're going to go ahead and you're going to go into your champion stance, so that way it costs less stamina. And then depending on whether you're using a war axe, a sword, or a warhammer, that's where you're going to kind of decide on from there. And then you're going to basically continue along the same kind of tree and go ahead and buff yourself from there. So after you have your damage figured out, the next thing that you're going to be looking at is what kind of armor you want to go into. And like I was saying, you can go into light armor, although for a warrior I would not necessarily recommend it. Heavy armor is very, very, very powerful, and you also have ways to get around the kind of weight issue that you have. You can go ahead and you can pick up the Steed Stone, or at the last perk of the skill tree, you are able to go ahead and make it so that way armor does not encumber you at all, and you could run normal as if you had nothing on at all. So this is going to start off, you have your Juggernaut. This is very, very important. It's going to make it so that way your armor can absorb more damage for you. Very, very important. If you're going to go into an unarmed build, this has the Fist of Steel, so that way unarmed attacks are going to do more damage. This is unfortunately a requirement if you're going to want to go into this left side of the skill tree. Next we have Cushioned, half damage from falling when you're wearing full heavy armor. Then you also have Conditioning, which I was mentioning. It's going to make it so that way your armor weighs nothing and you're not slowed down when you're wearing it. This has a requirement of 70. Like I was mentioning though, you do have the Steed Stone, which can completely make it so that way you don't have to invest anything into this side of the skill tree at all. On the right side, that's going to be where you're going to be looking at the most after you're done with Juggernaut. You have Well Fitted, which is going to give you increased damage resistance. Next you have the Tower of Strength, 50% less staggering. Staggering can be quite annoying in this game, especially if you're starting to deal with some of the Draugrs that will shout at you around. That's very, very annoying. Tower of Strength, very good. I don't necessarily think I would prioritize this, although if you are going into some place where you know specifically you're going to deal with a lot of Draugr that are going to be shouting at you, especially if you're later on in the game, Tower of Strength will be very, very helpful for you. There is also a matching set if you're wearing a matching set of heavy armor. So if you're wearing full ebony, this is going to give you 25% increased armor bonus. And then lastly, you have Reflect Blows, which can give you a 10% chance to reflect melee damage back at your enemies when you're wearing all heavy armor. It does not have to be a matching set. So this can be very, very helpful for dealing out increased damage, especially if you're a big tanky character. Next I want to talk about smithing. Smithing is something that I think is very important for any kind of physical character, even a sneak character. This is very important. So this is going to deal with your armor and your resistances. So on the right side you will be building heavy armor, and on the left side you will be doing light armor. And they are going to meet somewhere around in the middle, around Dragon and Daedric. So the starting one is going to make it so that way anything from the steel, it's going to make it so that way you can improve that and build that, and it's going to make it so that way you can increase it that much more. That's very, very important. Steel is great for early game. Then going in Dwarven. Now a lot of people are saying, well, you're going to be, as you level up your other skills, you are going to be finding these kind of armors. And that's fine. You don't necessarily have to create the armors and weapons that you want, although the buffs that you get from improving them is very, 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 it's so worth it. I highly recommend investing into this as kind of your thing after you have your main damage and your armor figured out. This is definitely your third priority, looking into that. And then you also have something right here, which is Arcane Blacksmith. This is at requirement 60, so you are going to have to put a little bit of time into this, but around when you get to 60 on this is going to be when you start finding a lot of, enchanted items anyways. So this is going to allow it so that you can improve enchanted weapons. So this is definitely something you want to look into, but at max rank, level 100, you're going to be able to use your Dragonsmith, which is very, very important. Next I want to talk about enchanting. Enchanting is something that is very important for warriors and pretty much all classes in the game. Whatever you're building, definitely look into enchanting as an option. But it's especially important for warriors just because, like I was mentioning earlier, with how spells are cast on you, you don't necessarily have anything that's going to protect you, but you don't necessarily have to do all protections with the enchanting. You can also do things that's going to buff your damage, which is going to make it so that way you can level things up faster, and doing more damage is always a good thing. It's just going to make the game easier for you. So you have right here the Insightful Enchantment. This is basically, this side right here is going to do it so that way your armoring is going to be a lot better. It's just going to give you more protections. And that be your damage side. Fire enchantments are going to be better, your frost enchantments are going to be better, and your storm enchantments are going to be better. And then at the very, very top, level 100, you're going to make it so that way you can enchant an item with 2 buffs. So that is very, very important. The other thing I want to mention real quick is on the right side of the tree. This is not something that's too bad to look into, especially if you have something like an electric charge dagger or an electric charge warhammer, something of the sort. This is very, very helpful because as you're swinging your weapon, it loses its charge, and you have to refill that charge with soul gems. And you have soul gem charging. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So this can be very, very helpful, especially with a low requirement of only 20. This is something that would be worth picking up fairly early on, especially if you are going to be using an enchanted weapon. And then the last part is the Soul Siphon, which is another thing that's fairly low. It's a requirement of 40. Death blows on creatures, but not people, trap 5% of the victim's soul, recharging the weapon. That can be very helpful. I don't necessarily recommend this as being, a very high priority, but for the low requirement of 40, if you're looking around and you have a perk just laying around and you don't necessarily want to spend it on something else, go ahead and go into the Soul Siphon perk, as this will help you increase your weapon's usage. The last thing I really want to talk about here is archery. Now, archery is not a bad option at all if you're looking at a warrior. Warriors, they have the issue where they're brawlers, essentially, and sometimes it's beneficial to shoot at things from afar. So if you want to go ahead and invest a little bit into the archery skill, I highly recommend doing it. Archery is very rewarding. The most part, you're going to want to look at your damage here, just like if you were doing a two-hander or a one-hander. You're going to want to focus mainly on the damage. The next thing you have here is a critical shot, which is going to give you even more damage. You have a chance to hit criticals, and then you can move on from there. Hunter's Discipline. This is a very, very good perk to go ahead and invest into. Matter of fact, I will probably be investing into that very shortly myself. Ranger just allows you to shoot faster, which is going to be more DPS, which is just going to be better things for you. Although this is going to be something that you're going to want to look at more if you are more of a pure archer build. This is going to be something that you're definitely going to want to focus on. So this is not necessarily going to be a top priority, but anything with the archery kind of skill tree isn't necessarily going to be the most important thing for you. Generally, you're going to want to look at damage for this, just because this will allow you to kind of pepper your enemies and go from there. So that was the warrior race. I hope you guys enjoyed my guide. The warriors are very rewarding. I enjoy it quite a bit. This is definitely one of my favorite kind of classes to go ahead and build, and it is definitely great if you are just starting off in the world of Skyrim. So I'd like to thank you guys for checking out my video. If you haven't, please subscribe. Join the family. I love having more people in my family. I will be back with more videos for you guys. Thank you.